Try this one. Most of the biochemical reactions differ from those occurring in the non-living world in A, being spontaneous, B, releasing energy, C, being enzymatic, or D, requiring energy. Students, even if you don't know the correct answer and if you just focus on the options, you can still get the answer, because you see, being spontaneous, releasing energy, requiring energy, these are events, okay, which happen in whether it is non-living reaction or reactions occurring in the non-living world or the reactions in the living world. But being enzymatic, enzyme, these are compounds which are produced by the living cells. Are you understanding? So when you talk about biochemical reactions, you're talking about the chemical reactions which are taking place in the living, living. So option C, being enzymatic, that's the correct answer. Okay. So I'll repeat once again. See, most of the biochemical reactions differ from the ones that those occur in the non-living world in being enzymatic. Okay. In fact, only metabolic reactions can be said to employ or use enzymes as biocatalysts. And what do? They speed up the rate of reactions in the living system. So this saves the body a lot of energy, and the bodies or the living cells are able to get more products in a lesser amount of time. Okay. So when we talk about metabolic reactions, what reactions are you talking about? So you see, organic molecules may be broken down or synthesized by a series of enzyme controlled reactions. Okay. So there is no uncatalyzed metabolic conversion happening in the living system. Are you getting this? But then when we say enzymes act as biocatalysts, what are catalysts doing? We know that they are here, they are accelerating the rate of reaction. So are they the only catalysts that we are talking about? Well, catalysts are grouped in two basic categories, because you see, they are compounds which alter the rate of chemical reaction, right? So they can be either inorganic, like these metal ions, platinum, zinc and all, or they can be organic, like how enzymes are. Okay, they're synthesized in the living cells. So classical example, you can take trypsin, pepsin, salivary amylase. So they're all enzymes and they're organic. Are you getting this? Clear? So we see catalysts are inorganic or organic. As far as spontaneity is going, see, if you take into consideration, two basic examples. Let's say rusting of iron that you can observe in this image, or you take melting of ice at room temperature. You see, rusting of iron and the melting of ice are happening on its own, given the conditions that they are in. But there is no external intervention, in the sense you are not going in, or some animal is not going in to set about some change, right? So they are happening on its own because the conditions have changed. Are you understanding? So these reactions are what we say are spontaneous. So we see that non-living reactions can be spontaneous. In fact, spontaneous reactions take place even in the living system. All right. So for example, ripening of fruits. See the berries, they've changed their colors. Look, they're ripening. And finally, they've ripened on their own. Of course, on their own in the sense, whatever compounds are compound that has participated in making this happen is also its own, right? We didn't go and inject something to it. Easy? Now, what happens? Well, what is the role of enzymes in these spontaneous reaction? See this. Enzymes can allow reactions that cannot occur on their own, or can couple them to spontaneous reactions occurring in the body. Generally, metabolic reactions that release energy are considered spontaneous. So see, enzymes help here also. Clear? Then we were talking about, requiring energy and releasing energy. So you see, reactions in both living and non-living system can be either exothermic or endothermic. So those reactions which proceed with the release of energy, usually in the form of heat, are what we call exothermic reactions, right? And endothermic reactions are those that require energy, usually in the form of heat, to proceed further. Okay, so exothermic and endothermic reactions will take place in both living and non-living world. All right, I hope this helped. Let's try this one. Dash catalyze covalent bonding between two molecules to form a large molecule. So in simple terms, you are taking two molecules, sticking them together to make a larger molecule. In simple terms, right? Now let's see which is it. Is it A, hydrolases, B, transferases, C, isomerases, or D, ligases? If you focus just on the names of these enzymes, you would get a fair idea or rough idea on what they are capable of. See, hydrolases, water related. Transferases, shifting. Isomerases, formation of isomer. And D, ligases. So even though you don't know what ligases do, the other three don't really have anything to do with sticking something. What are you left with to do? It's option D, ligases, gluing. Okay, so option D is your correct answer. G, gluing. And let's understand how this works. See, when you talk about ligasing, or rather when you talk about covalent bond forming between two molecules, this doesn't happen, just by the role of enzyme only. This enzyme employs energy or uses energy from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which loses one phosphate molecule and gets converted to adenosine diphosphate, two molecules, right? And then you get the product in the form of a larger molecule. So when you talk about ligase, DNA ligase is a beautiful example where we see it catalyzes a reaction where we find that two DNA fragments, okay, are coming together. Okay, so we can't say coming together, we use a term called as condensation. So these two fragments of DNA, they come together, condense, and form phosphodiester bonds, thereby looking like a complete fragment. Okay, easy? So when we say ligases, what they do? Ligase catalyze synthesis of condensation of two groups. Can you see group 1 and group 2? Two groups by utilizing energy from compounds like adenosine triphosphate. That's what ligases do. Easy? Glue. As far as hydrolases is concerned, take a look at this example. You have two compounds in front of you. One is this particular and then another is water. Now hydrolysis or hydrolases, what they do is they catalyze hydrolysis reaction. So water molecule splits to give you another product. Look, the water molecule here is splitting where you see that one hydrogen will replace this double bonded O and R group and become OH, form a hydroxyl group. As far as these two compounds or these two molecules are concerned or this molecule is concerned, this will form a bond with a hydroxyl group. Are you understanding? Okay. So if you observe this, water splitting gave you a different compound. Now then you want to talk about transferases. Like we said, transfer. What is it going to transfer? Group of atoms. Okay. Observe this. You have two compounds in front of you and observe the amino group and the double bonded oxygen. That's exactly switched. Can you see that? That is what transferase is doing. Then you came across isomerase. Isomerase, this is a class of enzymes which is involved in converting a substance into its isomer. Now, beautiful example that you come across in glycolysis, splitting of glucose molecule, which you will see in respiration. So there are two basic compounds there. One is dihydroxyacetone phosphate and its isomer glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Now these are 3-carbon compound. In DHAP, you see that phosphate is bonded to the first carbon and in GAP, it's bonded to the third carbon. And the enzyme isomerase is capable of switching these forms. Yeah? Now, are these the only enzymes that we are supposed to be concerned about? Well, you've got two more, oxidoreductase and lyase. So, oxidoreductase is a class of enzyme that catalyzes reactions involving electron transfer. So, oxidation reduction reactions. And see, I told you, some enzymes the names are based on their function. So, oxidoreductase, oxidation reduction reactions. Then the enzyme lyase is going to do work similar to water, but without using water. See, enzyme that catalyze the removal of group from substrate. You just want to remove something from the substrate without employing or in mechanism other than hydrolysis. That is what lyase is capable of doing. All right. So hope this helped. Let's try this one. Factor or factors which can influence enzyme activity is or are A. High temperature, B. pH, C. Substrate concentration, or D. All of these. Students, the correct answer for this particular question is all of these. Temperature can influence, pH can influence, substrate concentration can influence. In fact, even enzyme concentration can influence the activity. Okay. See, let's discuss and understand how. When you talk about temperature, it is observed that there is something called as optimum temperature. What is that optimum temperature? It is that temperature at which the enzyme shows its highest activity. So we can say for that particular enzyme, that's its favorite temperature. So it is able to give out the best of itself. And the enzyme activity was seen to decline both below and above the optimum temperature range. Same with pH. So each enzyme has its own characteristic optimum pH range. All right. Now, what does it do in this optimum pH range? Well, its activity is maximal. In fact, a shift to the alkaline or acidic side of the pH scale will immediately cause a drop in its activity. Okay, that's what the word optimum tells you. It's enzyme's favorite. And different enzyme will have not, or let me put it this way, not all enzymes will have their same favorite temperature or same favorite pH. Easy? Let's see, let's plot this on a graph and observe. Here, the x-axis is showing you an increase in temperature and the y-axis is plotting out the rate of reaction. If you observe this beautiful line growing up, you see that the rate of reaction is slowly increasing as temperature is increasing because the molecules are developing more kinetic energy as temperature increases. It hit a peak where the activity was maximum and that peak is the optimum temperature. After which we saw that the activity drastically declined. Why? Well, you see, enzymes are made up of proteins and a constant increase in the temperature beyond its comfortable range or optimum range will start breaking down the structure of the protein or the, which is the component of enzymes. So we say that denaturation will take place and then the enzyme will not really be able to perform anything or, do any activity. Same. Now, another thing about pH. Here in this particular graph, you're looking at 3 enzymes: pepsin, salivary amylase, alkaline phosphatase. And their peaks are also symbolizing their optimum pH. Observe, it is varying for all 3. For pepsin, it's going somewhere around, 1.51. And salivary amylase is, going somewhere around 6. And alkaline phosphatase is going around 8.59. These different pHs, please observe, are also showing you a decline, like, front and back. So this indicates again that the activity will decline in the change in the pH from its optimum side. Are you getting this? Now, when you talk about substrate concentration on the other hand, so let's establish one thing very clearly, that both temperature and pH will show you a decline whether you go beyond that range or whether, before that range. So there will be a decline. But when you talk about substrate concentration, what happens in substrate concentration is, please note that substrate is that material or the substance on which the enzyme is going to work on so that you get a product. And how will this happen? The substrate and the enzyme form a beautiful enzyme substrate complex. Once this complex is formed, you will see that enzyme working hard to give you a product. Okay. So look at this. If other conditions are constant, an increase in the substrate concentration increases the rate of enzyme catalyzed reaction. So increase in substrate increases the enzyme, you can say the rate of reaction. But when it reaches the maximum, a further increase in substrate concentration produces no additional effect. So it hits a plateau. Now why is this so? Because this is due to the fact that the rate of formation of an enzyme substrate complex becomes limited by the enzyme concentration. Because enzymes are busy, they're all occupied. Look, this is a beautiful graph where the x-axis stands for the substrate concentration and the y is standing for the rate of reaction. 3 different conditions: low substrate, medium substrate, high substrate. Higher the substrate, higher are the chances of the enzyme encountering the substrate molecule and forming a bond. You see, these people don't have eyes and they can't really, call out to each other and hear. So all they have to do is make sure they bump into each other and are able to bring that about. Okay. So here, when the substrate concentration is low, enzyme encountering the substrate chances goes low. So lesser enzyme substrate complex. As you increase the substrate, the chances of enzyme encountering the substrate increases, and obviously you will see the rate of reaction increasing. And finally, when you keep on increasing the substrate, all the enzymes available, if they are occupied, or if all the enzymes are in the enzyme substrate complex, then you hit a plateau. Okay, because no matter how much more substrate you add, the enzymes available are all busy. Are you getting it? So that's why we say it's a stagnancy. Clear? In this graph, however, this is the normal activity plotted, and if you see, there is no normal decline. The normalcy is stopping at this plateau. Did you get that? Now let's understand what will happen if the enzyme concentration is also coming into picture. So look, it is very easy. If the substrate is in excess, an increase in the enzyme concentration causes an increase in the rate of reaction. So if you see this and you say, oh my God, so many substrate molecules are getting wasted, what do? There is no increase happening. Okay, you add more enzymes. So then you'll say, okay, we add more enzymes and yes, the rate of reaction is increasing. But again, it will only happen up to a point. It will again hit a plateau. All right, see this. If the substrate concentration is relatively low, an increase in the enzyme concentration would cause a rise in the rate of reaction up to a certain point only. And thereafter, the rate of reaction becomes constant because there is lack of substrate molecules now. Okay. So then there is no more substrate available for the enzyme to actually work on. Easy? If the enzyme concentration is too much. Did you get that? So when you talk about these factors, I would request you people to put two buckets. Okay. One bucket where you are prominently seeing, slowly increase, peak, decrease. So in this bucket, you will have temperature and pH. Increase, peak, decrease. Then you make another bucket with enzyme concentration and substrate concentration together, where when you, say substrate concentration, so first is increase, then up to a certain point, after a point, it hits a plateau, saturation. Enzyme concentration also the same thing, increase, then plateau. All right. So substrate concentration, enzyme concentration in one bucket, temperature, pH in one bucket. Try this one. Basically, how many types of enzymes have been recognized by the International Union of Biochemistry? Is it A4, B5, C6 or D8? Let's count. If you take a look at the list of enzymes, well, we can say that there are, 6 basic classes: oxidoreductases, transferases, hydrolases, lyases, isomerases, and ligases. 6. Let's pick our answer. Option C, 6. What I want you to do is just observe these names again, because these names will talk or will take you closely to the function of the enzymes. See, oxidoreductase, oxidation reduction; transferases, shifting, movement; hydrolases, water related; lyases, we'll see; isomerases, isomers, isomer formation; and ligases, again we'll see. So let's discuss this. When you talk about the 6 enzymes, let's pick 2. Oxidoreductases, like we saw, they are a class of enzymes which catalyze the reaction that involve electron transfer as observed during oxidation and reduction. Transferase, on the other hand, will catalyze reactions which involve transfer of groups of atoms from one particular molecule to the other. Look like this. In simple terms, if you want to express it, you can express like this. See, A and B are getting, undergoing oxidation and reduction together to give you this particular appearance. So A is oxidized and B is reduced thanks to oxidoreductase. And transferase, easily observe, a very beautiful way of expressing is, can you see A with the group B and then you got C alone? Transferase can shift this B to C, making a newer compound. All right. So that's what transferase will do. Further, when you talk about hydrolase and lyase, now their function may be a little close to each other, okay? But main difference is hydrolase will do hydrolysis, which is breaking a water molecule, and that water molecule breakage will give you, will help you remove a particular group from the substrate. Lyase does something similar, but does not use water. See, enzymes that catalyze the removal of groups from substrates by mechanisms other than hydrolysis, leaving the double bonds. Okay, so see this. When you talk about hydrolysis, you have AB. Now AB in the sense a compound which has a group B. Adding water molecule is helping get rid of that B. So A and B are being separated off, or rather you're able to make that change from the substrate. Let's say if AB, the entire substrate molecule, by addition of water and splitting of the water molecule, brought about by hydrolase. Okay. Further, we can see lyase. What lyase is doing is it's using other than water molecule. See, anything other than water molecule, but the effect is quite same. See, you got A here, B here, separated. But again, when is this coming into picture? When you are dealing with a double bond. Can you observe? And the splitting of this particular molecule is also taking them away. So it's like these people are helping split or remove a group from the substrate. Further, you had isomerase and ligase. Isomerase are a class of enzymes that are involved in the reaction which convert a substance into its isomer. Whereas ligase are a group of enzymes or a class of enzymes that catalyze the reactions which lead to the formation of a bond, or they help in linking two compounds together. Like, let's put it in simple equation. First of all, isomer, see, A to B, there is no splitting and breaking. It's just a rearrangement, isomer. And then you talk about ligase, see, A and B coming together, using energy to finally give you a new product. Or we can also say two molecules coming together to give you a larger molecule. But in this process, we see that adenosine triphosphate gets converted to adenosine diphosphate because of the loss of phosphate molecule that contributes the energy required in this reaction. All right. So hope you were able to recap and recollect all the 6 classes. You are expected to, retain what they do, and it's so easy. It's based on their names, right? Fat is hydrolyzed by the enzyme lipase to yield A, fatty acid and amino acid, B, glycerol and fatty acids, C, glycerine and water, or D, glycerol and amino acids. Students, you know what? You can get these questions answered by, even if you know your concept of proteins very well, you'll still get this. Because we know that amino acid is a constituent of protein, not fats. So quickly eliminate the option which has amino acid. A goes, D goes. Now the next thing is you are hydrolyzing. See, lysis is breakdown. Hydrolysis, water break, splitting, not breakdown, splitting. So hydrolysis, splitting of water molecule. Glycolysis, splitting of glucose molecule, right? So here, if you're doing hydrolysis of fat, at least fatty acid should come out in, common sense. That fatty acid you will see coming out from fat. So which option has fatty acid in it? Option B, not C. So you can eliminate option C and you get your answer option B. Okay. One thing I'd like to clarify before we go further into understanding how this happened is the term glycerine. Students, don't get confused with the term glycerine. It's a commercial name for glycerol. All right. So let's see the structure of fatty acid first. See, fatty acid is nothing but it's a carboxylic acid with an R group attached. Carboxylic acid, COOH, right? Now, this R group can be anything, like it can be a methyl, ethyl, or any other CH2 compound with higher carbon. All right. So glycerol, on the other hand, it is an alcohol with 3 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 5 hydrogen. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3 hydroxyl group. 1, 2, 3. Now these two combined. Now what instead of directly going into understanding what they're giving after breaking, let's go and understand how they are made. All right. So you got fatty acid, you got glycerol. Now an ester bond is going to be formed between the acidic group of fatty acid, that was the COOH carboxylic group, and the hydroxyl group of glycerol. All right, this was the hydroxyl group. Now, what will happen is, in this process, we see that a water molecule is removed. Since you're losing water, we say dehydration reaction. Okay. Now, lipases, what will lipase do in all this? Well, let's go. What will happen when you want to break? Add lipase. Lipases are the enzymes that catalyzes the hydrolysis of lipids. Okay, and they use water. See, they break down fats into fatty acids and glycerol this way. We are looking at triglycerides, esters. Okay, so esters, we generally use the term glycerides. So this is triglycerides. Add water and split this molecule. You will see the splitting of that water molecule will happily give you fatty acid and glycerol both. All right. And this reaction is what we say hydrolysis of triglycerides. Easy? So just remember this simple concept that yes, lipases will give you fatty acid and glycerol from fats. You can even say from triglycerides. Easy?